Hi, my name is Kate. I'm working with Blake, Francisco, and Aiden. This is Crash Course Vietnam War, and today we will be talking about the style of fighting and military leaders in the Vietnam War.
Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course World History, and today we're going to discuss the series of events that made it possible for you to watch Crash Course.
Today we'll be talking about three U.S. Army generals. The first one is going to be General Creighton. He was a U.S. Army general who commanded military operations in the Vietnam War from 1968 to 1972. He was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army. He was born on September 15th, 1914, and died on September 4th, 1974. Second one we'll be talking about is Earl Wheeler. His nickname was Buzz. He was born on January 13th, 1908, and died on December 18th, 1975. He served as an Army General from 1962 to 1964. He was appointed Wheeler Chairman of Joint Chief of Staff. He urged the President to attack North Vietnam War. Third and last one is going to be Elmo Zumwalt. He was the youngest person to serve as a Chief of Naval Operation. He was born on November 29th, 1920, and died on January 2nd, 2000. He reformed the U.S. Navy personnel policies as an effort to improve enlisted life and ease racial teachings. Retired after 32 years of the Navy.
William Westmoreland, Maxwell Taylor, and John Paul Vann were all military leaders in the Vietnam War. William Westmoreland was a U.S. Army general. He served as Chief of Staff from 1968 to 1972. He wrote 3 books: A Soldier Reports, U.S. Army Field Manual 3031B, and Report on the War in Vietnam. He adopted a strategy of attrition meaning wearing down the enemy to the point of collapse. Some of my favorite quotes from him were, "The military don't start wars, politicians start wars," and "War is fear cloaked in courage." Maxwell Taylor was a senior U.S. Army officer and diplomat. He was the commander of the 101st Airborne Division, nicknamed the Screaming Eagles. He wrote 3 books: The Uncertain Trumpet, Swords and Plowshares, and The Precarious Security. John Paul Vann was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by John F. Kennedy. He was also characterized in the HBO film A Bright Shining Lie. One of my favorite quotes from him was, "We don't have 12 years experience in Vietnam. We have 1 year's experience 12 times over."
South Vietnamese officials claimed that 2 companies from the North Vietnamese army had invaded South Vietnam. As a result of this, the battle resulted in Quang Tri province just south of the demilitarized zone happened. But the North Vietnamese were defeated. Since the North Vietnamese main forces units had not been seen in South Vietnam before, U.S. military advisors questioned whether these were actually North Vietnamese troops. But in reality, Hanoi had ordered its forces to begin infiltrating to the south. This marked a major change in the war and resulted in President Lyndon Johnson committing U.S. combat troops. North Vietnamese and U.S. troops fought for the first time in November 1965 in the Battle of La Drang Valley in the Central Highlands.
The Army of the Republic of Vietnam were the ground forces of South Vietnamese military from its inception in 1955 until the fall of Saigon in April 1975. It is estimated to have suffered 1,394,000 casualties just during the Vietnam War. The Army came very closely affiliated to the U.S. Army, and at its peak, an estimated 1 in 9 citizens of South Vietnam were enlisted, and it had become the 4th largest army composed of regular forces and voluntary people. Some people called it the People's Army of Vietnam. The Army was only around for 20 years, but it did a lot of good for the state at the time and current Vietnam.